When the Scots-Irish set off down the old wagon road in America for the early 1700s, they took their music with them. Did this leave a musical legacy? Drummer Mark Wilson went stateside to fin it.
I've been lucky enough over the last 20 years to tour and travel the world playing with drums and percussion. And during that time I've become aware of and been told of an influence that the Ulster Scots or Scots-Irish have had on the music of the southeastern states in the US. So I've decided to come over and journey down that great wagon road. I'm starting that journey in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is the largest city in the state of Pennsylvania with 1.5 million people. However, back in the early 1700s, the population was only a couple of thousand when the Scots-Irish sailed up the Delaware River in search of a new life. The earlier waves had arrived in further north, in New York and Boston, but weren't particularly welcome by the Puritan landowners. But in the Quaker landowners of this area, they found friends. They brought with them their values, their traditions, their culture, and their music. They wouldn't have left that behind. So if you think of all the boats that arrived here and the Scots-Irish getting off on the banks of this river, a suitcase in one hand, an old beat-up fiddle in the other, or a box with an accordion in it, or maybe just the songs in their hearts, their songs and their ways and their music of the old land that they brought here to this new country with new hope for a better life. And of course, the Scots-Irish continued to come over the centuries, and it's hardly surprising that eventually the bagpipes came with them. How did there come to be, first of all, a pipe band in Philadelphia, and secondly, with the name Ulster Scottish?
Well, my grandfather came from the town of Moneymore in Ireland.
Oh, yeah, right.
Back in 1921. And in 1922, him and some of his mates started the band. And it was originally called the Ulster Pipe Band.
Right.
And through the years, it became the Philadelphia Ulster Pipe Band and then the Ulster Scottish Pipe Band. And my grandfather was one of the pipe majors. And my father was the pipe major from 1960 till 2002. And then I took the band over.
David, I was having a little rattle on the practice pads on the bonnet of the car with some of the lads earlier.
Sure.
With the music in front of them. Do you mind if I have a wee tune with you and play a wee score with you?
Not at all.
And David, in the band today you wear the Ulster Scottish tartan.
We do wear the Ulster tartan. There was a drum major, his name was John Neal, who was a drum major in Ontario. And we saw the uniform, and he was wearing a full kit with a long plaid, and thought it was quite nice. And the feather bonnet, and thought it was quite nice. So in 1993, we switched over to the Ulster tartan.
The first time I saw the band was last year in the middle of August at the World Championships in Glasgow.
Yes, we were Glasgow Green.
Yeah, but I hear the band's maybe intending to travel back to Scotland next year maybe and compete at the World Championships.
In 2011 we will be going back to the World Championships, and we have been upgraded to 3A for that year.
And I also hear the Ulster connection's not being lost on that. When you're going back to Scotland, you're hoping to come and compete at the Ulster Championships the week before the Worlds.
That's our goal, if we can afford it economically, to go and fly into Ireland and do the Ulster Championships, and then go down to Scotland and do the World Championships, and then come back.
So the music really will have gone full circle, coming from Scotland to Ireland, over here to Philadelphia, and you guys now taking it back to both Scotland and Ulster again.
Absolutely.
Now, the people who moved here from Ulster,
were restless people. When they got here, it was said of them that they were never happy until they had moved at least twice. So they moved southwards from Philadelphia down into Virginia, and that's where my journey's going to take me. Having started my journey in Philadelphia, I'm now travelling southwards down the Shenandoah Valley. I'm actually driving along the Great Philadelphia Wagon Road, which started out just as a path made by the native Iroquois. It was their warpath southwards to trade and to fight with the people of the Carolinas and Virginia. This is the path that the Scots-Irish used as they moved southwards from Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. So along this road sprung up lots of farms, barns, a few villages, and the spread of the Scots-Irish southwards continued. Winchester, Virginia, a very important settlement in the movement of the Scots-Irish through this area. And actually, it was the place that a family, Samuel and Mary Glass, moved to from just near my home in Banbridge in 1730. And their grandson, Colonel William Glass, made it to the rank of colonel in the American military. But of course, there's also a musical connection here with Winchester as well. On the 8th of September 1932, Winchester, Virginia was the birthplace of Virginia Patterson Hensley, better known as Patsy Cline.
I should know I'll never wear your ring.
Now, Patsy Cline herself wasn't of Scots-Irish ancestry, but the music and the influences that she had in this area definitely were. The Ulster Scots who moved here, the essence of them and their music was their storytelling, their balladry and their religious themes, all of which became inherent ingredients within the modern day country music. And that's the music that Patsy Cline grew up with. But of course, it would be unfair to say that the Scots-Irish invented country music all on their own. There was influences from the Dutch, from the German, but they were certainly responsible for the biggest influence on it.
Sweet dreams of you. Every night I go through.
I hear you two have toured in Northern Ireland before.
We have, in '99 and 2000. We played the Maiden City Festival in Derry. Then also got to play in Ballymena, Coleraine, Belfast. We hooked up with a fiddle player that you actually know over there, a guy named Willie Drennan.
Yeah. And did you notice any similarities between the music that we had in Northern Ireland and the music that you play here, the country music that you play here in Winchester?
Oh yes, the tunes are so much alike. I mean, the tunes are so close. You all might call it one name, but we call it something else, but it's the same tune. It's the same tune.
Why can't I forget the past and love somebody new instead of having sweet dreams about you?
So Patsy herself wouldn't have been of Scots-Irish descent or origin, but her music may well have been.
For sure, it's probably influenced at some point in time.
And where we are today is literally a street away from where Patsy Cline was born.
Patsy's mom, you know, just lived a couple of blocks over.
Instead of having sweet dreams about you.
By 1765, the Native American path had been widened enough to accommodate the horse-drawn vehicle, which then allowed the Ulster Scots to move southwards towards Tennessee. Eventually it was widened enough to accommodate the famous Conestoga wagon, which was 26 foot long by 11 foot high. A big wagon indeed. This is my wagon. It's got to get me all the way to Tennessee as well. So I'm on my musical journey, following down the Great Wagon Road, starting off in Philadelphia, down through Pennsylvania, into Virginia, through Winchester, and now I'm heading for Staunton. Down through the mountains of the Shenandoah Valley, the Blue Ridge Mountains, the Smoky Mountains, the Appalachian, all were inhabited by the Scots-Irish who came here and who left their music here.
Staunton is a small town in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia. It's known for being the birthplace of Woodrow Wilson, the 28th US President, whose ancestry was Scots-Irish. His parental grandparents emigrated to the United States from Strabane. Staunton is also the home of the Frontier Cultural Museum, which tells the story of the thousands of people who migrated to colonial America. It includes an Ulster cottage, which was moved over stone by stone from Tyrone and rebuilt. But what is of particular interest to me is the 18th century settlement, which is similar to that which the Scots-Irish would have built as they laid down roots down the old wagon road.
The house being a single room dwelling, sometimes for two, was actually fairly similar to what people had left back in Ireland, usually made out of stone, however, this being wood, and that's really just the available materials that they're using. And we are not yet finished. We actually need to do a little bit more work to the roof and actually fill in the gaps between the logs with chinking to actually form an insulation between the logs and make this house a little bit more comfortable.
Now, just looking at that house, I can imagine that after a hard day's work, you may well have had a little party, a bit of a dance, and out could have come a fiddle and a banjo or a mandolin or something like that.
All these instruments would have been available. If they played it in Ireland, they're gonna bring it with them because it's definitely one of those prized possessions, just like their tools. There's also some new instruments that are coming about, like banjos, which are an African instrument that they might pick up and start learning how to play too. There's going to be tons of songs that they'll bring over, ones like Lily Bolero or Star of the County Down, and not only that, but they would teach those songs to maybe some German immigrants or to English, and everyone's kind of trading tunes and trading musical styles out here. So all of those music types that you know today are definitely coming from people like the Scots-Irish or the English and Germans all mixing together.
So, all fairly convincing evidence that the Scots-Irish not only brought their style of architecture, their style of agriculture, but they also brought their style of music. And here in Virginia, that would become what we know as bluegrass.
Well, little piece of pie, little piece of pudding, I'm going down the road to sing some goodie.
I would say that we're a combination of things: old-time music, bluegrass, Appalachian, and they're all influenced by the Scotch and Irish. It's really hard for me to say what the essence is.
And you guys,
I mean, Appalachia is known to be a Scotch-Irish area. You know, if you go into the hills, that all the quilt styles and things like even the artistry has been passed down. It's more than music; it's a whole culture. I think that, you know, we've developed our own here, but it all came from where you're from. You know what I mean?
Jones in a rocking chair, picking on that with big old bear. Oh, Grandpa Jones in a rocking chair, picking on that with big old bear.
What we do is we've been told is unique. We kind of like to take it back to an older time, you know, more innocent, I guess, you know.
And some people call it hillbilly music, is that right?
Yeah, in a sense, and some people take it negatively. Me personally, I take it as a compliment. If somebody says I'm a hillbilly, well, thanks, you know.
So you're quite proud to be a hillbilly?
Yeah, I was born and raised. I have no choice. I'm a West Virginia hillbilly, so that's a double negative.
Well, little piece of pie, little piece of pudding, I'm going down the road to see Simon Goodell.
This is Lexington in Rockbridge County, Virginia, and it was here in the neighbouring county of Augusta that most of the Scots-Irish who moved to Virginia settled and made their home. Of course, they and their descendants had a great influence on the history of America. And Stonewall Jackson, who lived here in this house, he was a famous general in the Confederate Army of the Civil War, whose great-grandfather, John Jackson, came from the Birches in County Armagh and sailed here to America in 1715. So the Scots-Irish made their mark on American history. And of course, they also made their mark on American music. Bristol, Virginia, or Bristol, Tennessee. Depends which side of the street you're on. The state line's right up the middle of the main street. But whichever state you're in, it's still pretty obvious. You're in the birthplace of country music. Because it was here in 1927 that Ralph Peer from the Victor recording label made the first country album. He recorded it in a portable studio, and one of the first acts he recorded was the Carter family.
Meet me by the moonlight, oh, meet me. Meet me by the moonlight, oh, come. I have a sad story to tell you. Called down by the moonlight alone. I'm going to my new jail.
20 miles drive from Bristol into Tennessee, you'll find the Carter Fold, which is the site of A.P. Carter's grocery store, and is now also the site of the original Carter homestead, which has been moved and rebuilt here.
The Carter family are said to be the originators and the first family of country music. In 1927 they recorded their first album, and over the next 17 years they would record over 300 songs, most of which had a Scots-Irish influence or origin. Their music was particularly influenced by an Ulster Scot called Leslie Riddle, who gave them many of their songs and tunes that they recorded on their early albums.
I have a ship on the ocean, all laid lined in pure gold, and before my little darling shall suffer, I'll have a ship anchored and sold. Meet me by the moonlight, oh, meet me.
Meet Me in the Moonlight is more old time rather than country, because the Carter family did old time country and maybe a few other styles. What would be the main difference between what's old time and country?
I like to define this in terms, and you being a rhythm player will understand, I like to define it in terms of where the beat emphasis is. And a lot of listening to Scottish and Irish music myself, I hear that a lot of the emphasis is on the downbeat, the first beat.
Yes, especially in Scottish music.
Yeah, and then you have country music, and country music started to introduce the emphasis on the 2 and the 4, so the second and the fourth beat.
Can you give me an example of those two styles?
Sure. Let me. Why don't you give me a 2 and a 4? I'm going to play a little tune that Bill Monroe recorded called "Back Up and Push." So just give me a little 2 and a 4, and I'll show you.
Back up and push.
Right.
Okay.
Now, if you're playing Scotch-Irish influence music, here's a tune that comes from Scotland. It's The Soldier's Joy. You're going to have the beat on the 1 beat. So you can hear that more of that feel on the 1 beat with the Soldier's Joy.
Which is actually exactly the way that a Scottish reel, and especially a Scottish strathspey, which is in 4/4 time, has a huge, big, strong beat on the 1 of the bar.
Right.
And that's the music the Scots-Irish would have brought over here, and it stayed the same music, only with switching the beat to 2 and 4 to become bluegrass and become country.
Right.
So it was all the same music.
Yep, with just a little different feel. Okay, so Mark, let's play Soldier's Joy the old-fashioned way on a fiddle, the way they might have done it in Scotland. And just give me a 1 and a 3 on this. I'm going to give you some potatoes. Okay. Here we go.
Well, I'm learning a lot more about the music and getting reinforcement of the ideas that I had before I came out here. People who had told me back in Northern Ireland about the influence on country music, on bluegrass music, on gospel music, but that was all second hand. Now I'm learning about those influences from the people who are descendants of the Scots-Irish. So it really has made me feel closer to people who are almost like my kith and kin, people who I can identify with, and people who identify with me and my kith and kin back home. My journey from Philadelphia, down the Great Wagon Road, through Pennsylvania, into Winchester, Virginia, and on to Bristol. It's now taking me further into Tennessee. I'm just about to cross the Douglas Dam into the town of Dandridge.
Throughout the United States, there are many Highland Games events, and of course music festivals. One of the biggest Scots-Irish festivals is held here in Dandridge every September, and is totally based around music and dance. It's organised by local man Mark Murray.
We started this music festival. This will be our 4th year, and we feature exclusively Scots and Irish music and dancing.
And you have a bagpipe competition and you have a Highland dancing competition.
Yes, we just, this year we're sanctioned for Highland dancing, and we've had a bagpipe competition all the previous 3 years. And we close out our program with a lone bagpiper on top of the Dandridge Dyke.
Mm-hmm. Quite similar to the closing out of the Edinburgh military tattoo
we may have
stolen that idea from there,
yes.
or borrowed it from them anyhow. Now, Bob, you're the official county historian.
Yes, Mark.
This was the site of a church.
Yes. Mark, the earliest church in Jefferson County, the Hopewell Presbyterian Church, was founded here in 1785 during the state of Franklin. But it started here in a little log church building. Now, there's a monument over there also honoring some of our Revolutionary War veterans who were church members. The last 2 men on that name is the Rankin brothers, and they have documented roots back to Northern Ireland.
So there's been a long, long Scottish and Irish history here that still continues today.
That's right.
And I think one of the bands that you have at your festival on a regular basis are the Thistledown Tinkers.
Yes, Trip and Tom have been with us, I think, all 3 previous years. And they are very well received, and we get requests for them to come back every year.
So the people here like that style of music.
Where have you been, say, bra lad? Where have you been, say, Canty-O? Where have you been, say, bra lad? Do you come back, Kelly Cranky-O? had been where I had been, he would not be say canty-o. And if he had seen what I had seen on the braes of Killiecrankie-o. I fought at land, I fought at sea, at home I fought my auntie-o. But I met the devil and Dundee on the braes of Killiecrankie-o. And if he had been where I had been, he would not be say canty-o. And if he had seen what I had seen on the braes of Killiecrankie-o, yeah.
Killiecrankie, Robbie Burns tune, and certainly you do an up-tempo version of that. It's a fairly lively version.
I had heard that song done as a very slow song, almost like a lament or a ballad, and we were looking for more songs for Tom to play the banjo on, and when we started putting it together, we figured out it'd be a lot of fun to play it faster, and it just seems like anything related to Robert Burns ought to have some kick to it, you know?
I know there's a lot of Highland games throughout the United States, but you and your wife organise one of the games in this area.
Yes, the operative word being my wife. I drive the truck and run errands. My wife, Donna, started the Mint Hill Scottish Society, and then they formed their own Highland Games, the Mint Hill Scottish Festival and Highland Games. And we just finished our 6th year of the Mint Hill Highland Games.
So it's growing every year.
Yes, and it's really brought a lot of people in our area in touch with their Scottish and Irish roots.
Mackay, where Gardy lie in the brush beyond the Brankie-o. Ye better to kiss King Willie's loop than to come back Killiecrankie-o. And if he had been where I had been, he would not be say canty-o. And if he had seen what I had seen on the braes of Killiecrankie-o.
The connection for Scotch-Irish music here is it's really in a lot of the old-time music which precedes bluegrass even. There's all this great tradition of a cappella ballads, and they would just sit on the front porch like we're doing today and just sing these ballads to their kids, and they would pass them on, and then eventually they started doing bluegrass. And a lot of the bluegrass songs is interesting. If you look at a whole bunch of the early bluegrass, it's in the key of B flat. And that's an unusual key for most string instruments to play in, but that's where the bagpipe was in.
Yeah, because B flat's not an easy key to sing and do a lot of things in, so.
It's nae shame, nay, it's nae shame. It's nae shame to Shanky-o. There's sour sleighs and dead though braes, and the devil's in Killiecrankie-o. Woo!
So if you're ever waltzing through Tennessee on the last weekend in September, drop into Dandridge, check out the Scots-Irish Festival, and maybe you'll catch one of the regular acts there, the Thistledown Tinkers. I'm on the last leg of my journey in the USA, down the old wagon road. I'm heading from Dandridge in Tennessee to Charlotte, North Carolina, over the beautiful Great Smoky Mountains. Ain't it just pretty? My journey down the Great Wagon Road has ended here in Charlotte. But music wasn't the only influence the Scots-Irish had on the United States. In 1682, the Reverend Francis McAmey from Ramelton in Donegal sailed to America as a missionary, and a year later he established the first Presbyterian church in the town of Snowy Hill, Maryland. This was the start of Presbyterianism in America. And here in Charlotte we have a fine example of that Presbyterian influence. This is First Presbyterian Church, established in Charlotte in 1832 by the Scots-Irish. So I'm assuming that if people come here to hear the gospel preached, they also come here to hear the gospel in song.
In the early days of bluegrass music, gospel was an important part of it. In fact, that's where bluegrass musicians learned to sing harmony, was in singing schools and shape note singing and in church. And at all-day singings and dinner on the ground, they would sing these old songs, and that became incorporated into bluegrass.
A gospel message is a universal message of hope, you know, and I mean that really fits in with the music, and a lot of different people can relate to that.
So Wayne, you'd said about it being, you know, a music of hope. Well, it was a journey of hope when the Ulster Scots and the Scotch-Irish got onto the boat and sailed across the Atlantic, and they brought their moral values with them, their dance, their culture, and it's something I can relate to as well. Back home in Northern Ireland, we would have a lot of outside preachers who would go out and sing and give out gospel tracts and sing songs just like I'll Fly Away or Will the Circle Be Unbroken. And I remember sitting at home when I was a young boy listening most of the songs that we've talked about today on the radio on Sunday morning and gospel shows. So I feel really at home here with you guys playing the gospel music and the bluegrass. Well, this is the end of my journey down the Great Wagon Road. A journey in which I have learned so much and enjoyed so much. First thing I've learned is how desperate the Scots-Irish people must have been to leave Ireland, come to this new country and force their way down through what's probably the most beautiful countryside I've ever seen in my life. But when they came down through it, the infrastructure, the roads, the highways weren't there. They were going through forests, going through woods, real frontiersmen and women. And on the music front, I've had all of the facts that people told me before I came here confirmed, that the Scots-Irish had huge influence on the gospel music, the bluegrass music, the country music. They're all of Scots-Irish roots. It all goes back to the Ulster Scots who left the shores of Ireland to head for this new land. I'll be heading back home now, across the Atlantic, but I'll be back here because as an Ulster Scot, this place feels like home as well.
When I fall